What happens when a legendary British pop icon walks into what's supposed to be a light-hearted daytime interview, only to end up in the middle of a full-blown confrontation? The tension was thick from the moment Sir Cliff Richard stepped onto the View stage, but no one could have predicted just how explosive things were about to get between him and Joy Behar. Before we dive into this unbelievable showdown, make sure to hit that subscribe button and tell us in the comments what you think about celebrity interviews that go completely off the rails. It started like any ordinary morning at the View Studios in New York. Sir Cliff Richard, music legend, cultural icon, and one of Britain's most enduring stars, was there to promote his new memoir, The Dreamer, and his upcoming world tour. At 73, Cliff was no stranger to the spotlight. He'd survived the highs and lows of a 6-decade career with grace, charm, and humor. As the cameras rolled and the theme music faded, Whoopi Goldberg greeted him warmly. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the one and only Sir Cliff Richard." The audience erupted into applause as Cliff walked out, dapper in a navy suit, his signature silver hair gleaming under the studio lights. "Thank you so much for having me," he said with his familiar, easy smile. "It's wonderful to be here in New York." The conversation started off smoothly. Whoopi and Sarah Haynes asked about his memoir, his faith, and the lessons he's learned from a lifetime in music. Cliff spoke with sincerity and humor, his words carrying the weight of someone who's seen it all. Then came Joy. She had been quiet, too quiet. And when she finally leaned forward, her tone cut through the friendly atmosphere like a knife. "Speaking of storms, Cliff, you've certainly had your share of controversies over the years, haven't you?" The air in the studio seemed to freeze. Cliff's polite smile faltered ever so slightly. "I'm not sure what you're referring to, Joy," Joy smirked. "Oh, come on! The investigations, the allegations. Don't you think it's a little convenient to be promoting a book about redemption right after all that?" Whoopi shot Joy a sharp look, but the damage was done. The other hosts shifted uncomfortably as Cliff's demeanor hardened. "Joy," he began, his tone calm but firm, "you're conflating very different things. What you're alluding to was thoroughly investigated, and I was completely exonerated." Joy's eyebrows lifted. "Exonerated is a strong word. Just because no charges were filed doesn't mean—" "It means exactly that," Cliff interrupted, his polished charm giving way to anger. "It means I was innocent of any wrongdoing, which I always was and always will be." The room went dead silent. Viewers could almost feel the shift through their screens. But Joy wasn't done. "Surely you understand why people might be skeptical?" she pressed. "These kinds of accusations don't just appear out of nowhere." Sonny Hostin tried to intervene. "Joy, maybe we should focus on—" No, Joy snapped. "This is the conversation. Accountability, transparency, not just another PR redemption tour dressed up as faith and forgiveness." Cliff's composure cracked. "Accountability? For what exactly? For being falsely accused? For having my reputation destroyed by people who didn't care about the truth?" Joy rolled her eyes. "Oh, here we go, the victim narrative. It's always the same with you guys." "You guys?" Cliff shot back, his voice rising. "What exactly do you mean by that?" The tension was unbearable. Whoopi was signaling to producers off camera, the other hosts looked like they wanted to disappear, and Joy leaned back in her chair, smirking, satisfied, as though she'd just cornered her prey. "I mean privileged men who think they can sweep their past under the rug with a book tour and a few crocodile tears about faith," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. And that was the moment everything changed. Sir Cliff Richard, the consummate professional who had spent more than half a century mastering the art of composure under pressure, finally reached his breaking point. His face, usually calm and dignified, flushed a deep crimson. When he spoke, his voice was low and measured, each word landing like a hammer on stone, quiet, controlled, and far more powerful than any shout could have been. "How dare you?" he said, every syllable edged with precision. "How dare you sit there and level accusations against a man you've never met about matters you clearly haven't even bothered to understand properly?" For the first time that morning, Joy Behar seemed momentarily taken aback. Her eyes flickered with a trace of surprise at the venom in his tone, but it lasted only a heartbeat. Then the familiar smirk returned. She leaned back, clearly enjoying the chaos she had unleashed. "Oh, I've done my research, Sir Cliff," she replied, emphasizing his title with an acidic twist. "And what I found is a pattern, a lifetime of using your fame and your charity work as a shield." Cliff blinked, incredulous. "A shield?" His disbelief was palpable, his voice cracking through the tension. "My charitable work spans over 50 years. I've raised millions for children's causes, for disaster relief, for medical research, for people in need. Are you seriously suggesting that acts of compassion are some kind of smokescreen?" Joy's eyes glinted like a cat playing with its prey. "I'm suggesting," she said, leaning forward with predatory intent, "that powerful people often hide behind good deeds. It's the oldest trick in the book." Alyssa Farah Griffin finally broke her silence, her voice trembling slightly as she interjected. "Joy, maybe we should be careful about implying—" "Implying what, Alyssa?" Joy snapped, whirling toward her co-host. "Careful about holding powerful men accountable? That's the problem. Society's too eager to forgive, too eager to forget, just because someone writes a book about finding God." That was the moment Cliff stood up. The screech of his chair against the studio floor sliced through the silence like a blade. "I will not sit here and be lectured on morality by someone who clearly has no interest in truth or fairness," he said, his voice trembling with fury. Joy laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. "Sit down, Sir Cliff," she said mockingly, dragging out his title like an insult. "You came here to sell your book, remember? Let's talk about what's really in it. You go on about redemption and forgiveness, but what about responsibility?" "Responsibility?" Cliff's voice rose, thick with emotion, his accent sharpening with every word. "Responsibility for what? For being the victim of false allegations? For having my home raided live on television while I was thousands of miles away? For being humiliated and tried in the court of public opinion before I ever saw a shred?" Sir Cliff Richard, the consummate professional who had faced decades of tough interviews with grace, finally snapped. The mask of calm civility cracked. His face flushed crimson, and when he spoke, his voice carried a low, simmering fury that was somehow more terrifying than if he'd shouted. "How dare you?" he said, each word deliberate, sharp. "How dare you sit there and make accusations against a man you don't know, about matters you clearly haven't even bothered to understand properly?" Joy Behar's eyes flickered in surprise for the briefest second, but she recovered quickly, the faintest smirk tugging at her lips. She was enjoying this. "Oh, I've done my research, Sir Cliff," she said coolly, stressing his title with pointed sarcasm. "And what I found was a pattern using fame and charity as a shield." Cliff blinked, stunned. "A shield?" he repeated, disbelief breaking through his anger. "My charitable work spans 5 decades. I've raised millions for children's causes, disaster relief, hospitals. Are you seriously suggesting that helping others is some sort of cover?" Joy leaned forward, eyes narrowing like a predator scenting blood. "I'm suggesting," she said, her tone dripping with mock sincerity, "that powerful men often use good deeds to hide bad behavior. It's the oldest trick in the book." Alyssa Farah Griffin tried to intervene, her voice tentative. "Joy, I think we need to be careful about implying—" "Implying what, Alyssa?" Joy snapped, spinning toward her co-host. "That we should tiptoe around powerful men? This is exactly what's wrong with the world today. We forgive, we forget. We let them play the victim the moment they write a book about finding God." That was the final straw. Cliff stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the studio floor. The audience gasped. "I will not sit here and be lectured about accountability by someone who clearly has no regard for truth or fairness," he said, his composure finally gone. Joy chuckled, her tone mocking. "Sit down, Sir Cliff," she said, the title spat out like an insult. "You came on this show to sell a book, so let's talk about what's really in it. Redemption, forgiveness. But what about responsibility?" Cliff's voice rose, his British accent cutting through the tension. "Responsibility for what exactly? For being the victim of a malicious accusation that was proven baseless? For having my home raided live on television while I was half a world away? For having my name dragged through the tabloids for 2 years while I was completely innocent?" Joy waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, please," she said with a roll of her eyes. The persecution complex is strong with this one. That did it. Something in Cliff's expression changed. The anger drained from his face, replaced by something colder, wounded but defiant. His voice trembled when he spoke, but every word struck like thunder. Persecution complex? He repeated softly. Do you have any idea what it's like to have your entire life's work smeared because of lies? To have strangers decide your guilt based on gossip? To lose your name, your peace, your dignity for something that never happened? Welcome to the real world, Joy shot back, where actions have consequences and fame doesn't make you untouchable. What actions? Cliff exploded, his voice echoing through the stunned studio. What consequences? I was investigated for 2 years. The police scoured every inch of my life, spoke to everyone I'd ever known, and found nothing. Because there was nothing to find. Whoopi Goldberg was signaling off camera now, desperate to wrap the segment, but Joy wasn't done. If anything, Cliff's fury seemed to feed her energy. Police investigations aren't the only measure of truth, she said icily. Sometimes the system protects the powerful. Sometimes justice isn't served in a courtroom. Cliff laughed bitterly, the sound hollow. Justice? He repeated. You want to talk about justice? Where was the justice when my accuser stayed anonymous while my name was plastered across every headline? Where was the justice when the media declared me guilty before the investigation even began? When people like you decided I was guilty just because I was accused? Joy shrugged, her tone almost casual. If you've got nothing to hide, why so defensive? The question hung in the air like a trap, and everyone in the room knew it. It was the kind of question no one could answer without losing. Cliff stared at her, chest heaving, eyes burning. Defensive? He said finally, his voice low and dangerous. You ambush me on live television with lies and insinuations, and that's your takeaway? That I'm defensive? Joy smiled, a small, cruel curve of her lips. I'd call it suspicious, she said. Innocent people don't usually react this way to a few simple questions. Cliff's eyes flashed. Simple questions? He thundered. You've spent the last 10 minutes implying that I'm a criminal hiding behind charity, that my faith is fake, that my book is a lie, and that I escaped justice through privilege. And you call that simple? Sarah Haynes tried to jump in. Maybe we could talk about your upcoming tour. No, Cliff interrupted, still glaring at Joy. We're going to finish this. Because this right here, this is what's wrong with modern media. People like her, he said, pointing straight at Joy, think they can destroy a person's life with nothing more than bias and assumption, and then call it journalism. Joy laughed, actually laughed, and the sound was sharp, mocking, cutting through the tense silence like broken glass. Oh, this is rich, she said, shaking her head. Now I'm the villain because I asked some tough questions? This is exactly why victims don't come forward, because powerful men like you twist everything around until you're the ones who look like the victims. Victims? Cliff's voice trembled with barely contained anger. You want to talk about victims? I'll tell you about victims. Victims are the children I've spent my entire career trying to help through charity. Victims are the fans who've been hurt and confused by lies spread about someone they admired. Victims are the innocent people who have their lives destroyed by false accusations, while people like you cheer from the sidelines. The studio was dead silent. You could hear the faint hum of the cameras still rolling. Cliff's breathing was heavy, his face pale. Joy leaned back, a smirk tugging at her lips, satisfied. Are you finished with your little tantrum? She asked coolly. That was it, the breaking point. Sir Cliff Richard, who had carried himself with grace through 6 decades of fame, who had endured scandals and scrutiny with quiet dignity, finally snapped. His voice dropped to a deadly calm. Tantrum? He whispered. You think this is a tantrum? This is what happens when a decent man finally stands up to a bully. Joy's smirk faltered, just slightly, but she recovered quickly. Bully? I'm a journalist asking legitimate questions. If you can't handle that, maybe you shouldn't be doing interviews. Journalist? Cliff gave a bitter laugh that echoed through the studio. Is that what you call yourself? Real journalists deal in facts, not character assassination. Real journalists research. They don't rely on gossip and innuendo. I have done my research, Joy snapped back, though her voice had lost some of its confidence. I know about the allegations, the investigation, the settlement. Settlement. Cliff's voice rose sharply. What settlement? There was no settlement, because there was no case. You're making things up on live television. Joy's face turned red as realization hit. She had misspoken, confused cases, or worse, people. The other hosts looked horrified. They knew she'd just crossed a dangerous legal line. I meant the legal costs, Joy stammered. The money spent on lawyers and— Stop, Cliff said, raising a hand. Just stop. You've proven my point perfectly. You don't know what you're talking about. You've confused me with someone else, or mixed up completely different situations, and now you're destroying my reputation with information you can't even get right. Whoopi tried to step in. Cliff, I think there's been some confusion here. Joy, maybe we should— There's no confusion, Cliff cut her off, his tone icy. She came in with an agenda. She wanted to take down a guest for her own entertainment, and didn't bother to check her facts. This isn't journalism. It's a hit job. Joy opened her mouth but couldn't find her words. For the first time, she looked genuinely shaken. I never said you were guilty of anything, she muttered. I was just asking questions. Just asking questions? Cliff repeated, incredulous. You accused me of using charity as a cover. You implied I escaped justice through privilege. You suggested I was part of some pattern of powerful men avoiding accountability. And now you claim you were just asking questions. The producers were in full panic mode now, gesturing wildly, trying to cut to commercial. The audience sat frozen, aware they were witnessing daytime TV history in the making. Sonny Hostin tried to intervene. I think we can all agree emotions are high. Maybe we should just— No, Cliff interrupted, his eyes locked on Joy. I want her to answer one question. He leaned forward, voice steady but seething. Do you believe the police investigation was thorough? Do you believe that if there had been any evidence of wrongdoing, charges would have been filed? Joy shifted in her seat, clearly uncomfortable. I believe the system isn't always perfect. That's not what I asked, Cliff pressed. I asked if you believe the investigation was thorough. Yes or no? Joy hesitated, then admitted quietly, I don't know all the details of the investigation. Cliff leaned forward, his voice low but cutting. You don't know the details, he said slowly. But you felt qualified to question the results on national television. You don't know the facts, yet you were ready to destroy someone's reputation. Do you see the problem here? Joy's face flushed crimson. Her trademark quick wit was gone. I was trying to have a discussion about accountability in the entertainment industry, she said, her tone shaky. By using me as your example? Cliff shot back. Without bothering to learn the facts of my case? That's not a discussion, Joy. That's a lynching. The word hung in the air like a thunderclap. Gasps rippled through the audience. Joy's face went pale. She knew she'd lost control of the situation. That's a very strong word, she murmured. It's the right word, Cliff replied, steady and unflinching. When you destroy a person's name with lies and misinformation, what else would you call it? Whoopi gestured frantically off camera, desperate to cut to commercial, but Cliff wasn't done. I came here today to talk about my book, my music, my tour, he said, his voice gaining strength with every word. I came here in good faith, expecting professionalism. Instead, I was ambushed by someone who confused me with other people, invented facts that don't exist, and tried to destroy my reputation for entertainment. Joy opened her mouth, but Cliff raised his hand. I'm not finished. His voice trembled, not with fear, but conviction. For 2 years, I lived under a cloud of suspicion for something I didn't do. For 2 years, I watched my name get torn apart by people who didn't care about truth. And now, just when I've tried to move forward, people like you drag it all back up again. Not because you have new information, not because you care about justice, but because it makes good television. The studio was deathly still. The audience didn't move. Even the cameras seemed to hum quieter. Well, Cliff said at last, his voice soft but full of emotion. Congratulations! You got your dramatic television moment. You got to watch a man defend himself against lies, live on air. I hope it was worth it. With trembling hands, he unclipped his microphone and placed it gently on the table. Then, looking straight into the camera, he spoke directly to the audience. To anyone watching who's ever been falsely accused, Who's ever had their reputation destroyed by lies? Who's ever felt powerless against the court of public opinion? You're not alone. Sometimes standing up for yourself means walking away from people who don't care about the truth. He turned to the panel. Whoopi, Sarah, Sunny, Alyssa, thank you for trying to keep this dignified. You're professionals and it shows. Then his gaze fell on Joy Behar. She sat frozen, eyes wide, a flicker of guilt crossing her face. And Joy, Cliff said quietly, I hope someday you learn the difference between holding people accountable and tearing them down for sport. There's a real difference, and it matters. Without another word, Sir Cliff Richard turned and walked off the view set, leaving behind stunned silence and one of the most unforgettable live moments in television history. The camera lingered on Joy's face, pale, shaken, speechless, before Whoopi finally called for a commercial break. The fallout was instant. Within minutes, social media exploded, headlines blazed, and clips of the confrontation began circulating everywhere. But in that studio, one truth was undeniable. Cliff Richard had walked away with his dignity intact. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to participate in your own destruction.